Hi, everyone, and good morning. Glad to be here with you all. I have the privilege today to introduce Ken Mall, our next speaker, and I'm really excited for what he's going to be able to tell us. I actually had the opportunity to meet Ken after reading about his company EDSI's work with the National Governors Association Workforce Innovation Network. That's a nonpartisan learning and action collaborative for state leaders to build a resilient workforce. I looked at the work he's led over his more than 26 years of leadership at EDSI, and I made a cold call to his company, actually. And both his team and he himself made it about the nicest cold call I think I've ever made. I was really glad to get to know him a little bit. Called me back, I think the same day, or at least the next one. And I could tell you about his work with top tier companies, labor organizations, and government agencies, or his advising more than 65 government, workforce, and economic development agencies at the state, regional, and local levels. I could speak about how EDSI talks about how they quote, work hard to promote unsubsidized employment, self-sufficiency, and smooth operations. Does that sound like language that resonates with you, Fahe members? I think it probably does. And getting to know Ken a bit, he's in this work because of his values of helping people achieve that self-sufficiency, that dignity, that good life. He's an avid outdoorsman, and he appreciates a nice cold brew at the end of the day outside. But for Ken, the most important part of his life is his family and friends. And each year, a large group of his family and friends comes together to camp and be outdoors in a beautiful part of our country. So today, we're glad to have him with our big group of family and friends in a beautiful part of our country. Please join me in welcoming Ken Mall. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Really appreciate that. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to kind of speak with you and share some of, maybe our experiences and some of my stories with you all. And talking with Alex and kind of preparing for, really what he kind of thought we should talk about today. He really stressed, talking about our culture and our organization and really how we kind of do some things and what we do and why we do it. And in introducing me, Alex mentioned, our values and they certainly are my values, but they're also our company's values. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey today, tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do, and hopefully some of that resonates with you. And then I want to share some stories of some other organizations that are doing some really cool things and how they're being successful at that, which is really the message today is how they did it, and maybe it's something you could learn from that. I encourage participation. I had planned to be there in person with you all, and then other circumstances took over. So if you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or however you're communicating that. I'll kind of ask Alex to monitor that. And from time to time, I'll stop and I'll ask Alex if there's any questions that we can answer. And really at the end of the day, me and my organization, we're really here to help and really interested to learn more about you guys and what we can maybe do to help you and help the people that you're really trying to serve. So with that, I'm going to kind of just jump into it. Hopefully the screen is working and you can see that real well. Alex did a great job introducing me. I have been with EDSI for almost 27 years now. EDSI was actually founded, way back in 1979, based in Michigan. Over the years, we've grown. 1979, it was a two-person company, and today it's nearly 900 employees in almost 10 states across the country. And over that time, we've really worked hard on building our culture within the company. We've won awards like the Crane's Coolest Places to Work Award several times, America's Best Places, a whole bunch of different awards that we really focused on that are really focused on helping and engaging our employees. Earlier this year, we actually earned the privilege of becoming a certified B Corporation. And for those of you that don't know what a B Corporation is, what it is, it's a new kind of business model that really balances purpose and profit. We are a for-profit company. B corporations are legally required to consider the impact of our decisions, not only on our workers, but on our customers, on our business partners, and the community and the environment we work in. So, we take a lot of pride in really being a great partner in the community to really help the community, and being a B corporation is really holding us to that standard. So what do we do? Switch the screens here. So we are a workforce development and consulting firm. We work nationwide. We work with a lot of local workforce development boards, economic development agencies, state government agencies, across the country, and really working with them to help them figure out how to better help the citizens in their regions. Why do we do what we do? We really believe we can help our customers overcome their most challenging obstacles. And those customers aren't only the states that we work in, but those customers are the citizens that we help on a daily basis get job training and find jobs. Every year across the country, EDSI helps approximately 20,000 people find gainful, sustainable employment. So many of them were, ex-offenders. A lot of them are single parents that were really helping get back into the workforce and to sustain their lives. We do this by, seeing through their eyes. We believe constantly that we can make a difference in their lives. We want to meet people where they're at and help them get to where they need to be. And if you can imagine, we're a company of almost 1,000 people. And if you were to go into any of our program offices, you would see these same values that exhibited across our organization. And that last one there, we really do believe in living our professional lives in service to others. So really, this didn't start overnight. It was really about 1995 that we started really taking action in this area. So most of you are probably familiar with this picture. Three Rivers, Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh. It was about in the middle of 1995 that we were working with some folks in the city of Pittsburgh, and they were looking at their workforce development programs and really frustrated with how they were kind of helping their citizens, and frustrated at the difficulty of connecting people to jobs and getting the right job people, training the job people. So the city and we were advising the city, and the city kind of looked at us and said, hey, listen, we're going to put out an RFP. You guys as a company, you got a lot of great ideas. Why don't you bid on that work? Why don't you go ahead and do that work to kind of establish a program for us? And we had a lot of competition for that. We won that. That was back in the middle of 1995, and that was our first program that we started to help the citizens of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County really start to progress into what those jobs were. We're still running that program today, which has been a really successful program. So that was kind of our first foray into taking action and really kind of starting to align with what we're doing. What we've learned from that and since then is really kind of how this work gets done in this business. And I know, we're talking a little bit today on winning federal and state resources, and the tricks of the trade we're going to kind of share with you, and how this works is, there's really 4 basic things that we need to do and that we do constantly when we're applying for programs, to run programs, and when we're really looking, at how we can help other people with programs. One is to have a really defined need. What is it that you're trying to accomplish, and being real specific. And I know you guys are all probably great grant writers. Securing funds sometimes probably is kind of the easiest part of the job. But defining that need is really important in what we're doing. You need a strategy, right? So we're going to talk a little bit. I got a few examples here to share with you, some organizations and what their strategy is. Once you have that strategy to kind of engage the community, what's the plan? And then how do you implement that plan? And that final piece there is really the most important piece that we can stress here is partners. You all need partners in doing this. It used to be that you could go it alone and really try and work on these programs and develop workforce development training programs, or connect people to jobs, or even connect people to housing. But in today's world, you need partners. You just can't do it alone. In our world, it's all about finding, connecting people to those jobs so they can have that purpose in life and move on from there. So I want to share a little bit with you. I got 3 examples I want to share with you. And again, feel free to ask questions as we go. The Southern Carolina Alliance, they're a workforce development agency. They're located in southern South Carolina, a very rural part of the state, very poor, very depressed part of the state. And this economic development agency has done a pretty good job of attracting employers to their region. New factories coming up, distribution centers coming in. They've just recently announced a new farming collaborative that's going to use, farming inside of a building with ultraviolet lights, and they're going to, be able to farm all year round. It's really high-tech technology. But their issue has been not necessarily attracting businesses to the region. Their issue has been how to connect people to those jobs and how to sustain people in that region. Now, their economic data really does suggest that there's plenty of people living in the region. What their challenge has been is making sure that people stay in the region and connect to these jobs. So that's been one of their biggest challenges. So in thinking about, what their needs are, an economic development agency, their president, Danny Black, talked to him often. He acknowledges to me, he goes, we're not workforce development people, we're economic developers. I want to help employers, but he needs help with helping employers finding those skilled workers to fill those open positions. So he's had some frustrations recently. He's tried to work with the tech schools and the school systems, but they're just not speaking the same language. So his strategy has been, and we've been working with him on his strategy, is to bring together these community and government partners to implement some real life solutions that are going to help them. His plan, is to use data to identify and support the solution. So data is a real critical piece of this, and it really goes into supporting the data, or supporting the strategy. So what his data has revealed is that they have many workers in the region. Many of them are working in jobs that aren't paying sustaining wages, and they're below the poverty level. But there's jobs that are going unfilled in the region in manufacturing companies and distribution companies and in healthcare and in IT that are going unfilled because people don't have the right skills. Many of these jobs, the starting pay is $16, $17, $18 an hour in a region that the average pay is probably $12 an hour. So how do you start to connect these dots? The Southern Carolina Alliance would go to tech schools and say, hey, we need you to provide training in these regions. Tech schools would try to provide that training and nobody would come to the training. So that's where engaging with other partners really became important for them. And they had to figure out how throughout this process to speak the language of each other in order to get onto the same page. So working with their economic development partners, bringing in the tech schools, bringing in the Department of Commerce, and this is an interesting one. The Department of Commerce supports economic development, but in this case, what they're starting to do is support education in the region. So kind of a non-traditional partner to support education programs. And they're actually providing funding to the economic development agencies and to the school system to help supplement some of the programs that they have in the region, which is a really innovative and unique way to look at it. So it's really critical that they have those partnerships. Where they're at is, their next steps is they're actually convening a meeting in a few weeks in Columbia, South Carolina, to really try and build up, their partnership and really seek out opportunities to, build up their education programs. Something that they've really become really focused on, and it's something that is kind of lost, but is really important, is they've got the understanding today now that they really have to go back into the middle schools and into the high schools to start this career training. And think about that. Most of the time, economic developers are, they want to say, hey, listen, we've got jobs today. We need to hire 300 people. We need to hire 400 people. We can't wait 4 years for this. Well, the reality is 4 years is going to come eventually, right? 5 years is going to come. If you don't start building that pipeline today, you have to start at some point in time. So by going into the middle schools and going to the high schools and explaining the opportunities that are in the region is starting to help make aware what those jobs are, so people don't leave the region to go to Savannah or the coast in order to find those jobs. They can actually stay in the region and get a good job. We talked with a school group not too long ago in the region, and it was interesting because they were like, we never knew that those jobs are there. The teachers in the schools never knew that these jobs were available. So thinking about other partners, bringing into school systems as a partner to help explain what those jobs are. We had teachers wanting to volunteer to do internships over the summertime at some of these companies, just so they could learn about what these jobs were, so they could try to explain those to their students as they were going. So again, building those partnerships and finding where those opportunities are really important. The focus here isn't necessarily on the jobs creation. It's really helping build the community's awareness of those jobs, which will then lead to the demand for the schools to provide the training that they need. A trick in working with the school system sometimes, especially technical schools and community colleges, is to also understand that they're a business, right? They have seats to fill. And so the challenge for them is that making sure that they have inventory in classes that people actually want. And if people want classes in hospitality, or if they want classes in basic manufacturing, that's what they're going to offer. So the key here is to create that demand for those classes so that the technical schools can kind of see where the need is, and they can start to come together. So this whole group is starting to speak the same language. They're starting to identify what others deem as success, and really starting to work on how they can come together to build that pipeline for future workers in the region. I'm going to stop there for a second, Alex, and see if there's any questions as we go.
Thanks, Ken. We had a comment, from Rebecca Dillo at Clinch Powell that we need to work with the youth and prepare that pipeline to some agreement. I have a question for you. I'll give people a minute if they want to chime in. You mentioned this issue where the community colleges were putting together classes and people weren't showing up to the classes. And then you kind of came back to that and said they need to offer classes. So it sounds like there's maybe a couple of tier strategy. There's going into the middle schools, there's the community college offering pieces, and they're all part of a strategy together. There's not kind of one silver bullet, but by building these relationships, maybe a holistic approach is created. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly correct, Alex. And yeah, thanks for slowing me down on that, because I think it's a really important part. When you think about partnerships and bringing partners that have particular skill sets or offerings, it's really important to understand what their capabilities are. And that the school systems, the tech schools, created these wonderful classes that nobody was going to, and there are a lot of frustration. Well, come to find out is there wasn't really any active recruiting going on for those classes. So the question gets to be is, whose responsibility is it to do that recruiting? There's a class that would meet the needs of employers and prepare citizens really well to get a good paying job. Why wouldn't anybody want to do that? The tech school didn't consider their responsibility to do that active recruiting. So what we needed to do, what the Economic Development Agency needed to do, is find a recruiting partner. And that's where the community-based organizations came in. They reached out to those community-based organizations, say, hey, we have these opportunities. The training is free, no cost. It's going to lead to a job, and it's going to lead to a job where somebody doesn't have to drive 2 hours to get to it or an hour to get to it. So the key there is really starting to figure out who's going to do what and who's really good at doing things. And this is where I really think your organization, has a big benefit, because you have the ability to partner with other organizations, really find out where their needs are, and find out what the best way to partner is. So absolutely, I think it's really about trying to figure out who can do what, and then what's the plan to implement that. Never be afraid. One of my big mottos is, fail fast, right? So you can pick yourself up and try again, right? So once you have a plan or strategy in place, you need to follow it, but you also need to be flexible and build upon it. Great question. Any other questions?
Well, yes, thank you. That echoes actually what we heard from one of our speakers, that last point yesterday. And so, appreciate that, and appreciate the clarification and sort of setting out what you were saying just once more, so I could understand a little better. We have a question actually from our board chair, Karen Jacobson, who's speaking to us from Elkins, West Virginia. She asks, what specifically did the Commerce Department do to support the technical school system?
That's a great question. So they've done a couple of things. One is they have provided funding, non-solicited. Hey, their goal is, we're attracting business. What do we need? So the community college, the tech school system needed some additional funding to make these programs happen. So they provided some funding. The other thing they did, which I think is even more important than the funding, quite honestly, is that they acted as an intermediary to really bring the right partners together. So at the state level, the State Department of Commerce really focused on, bringing people together to have the conversations. Something that was really interesting about some of the funding that they offered is the Department of Commerce, economic development agencies, they build stuff, right? So what they did is they're putting money out there right now to build a regional training center. So economic development saying, hey, listen, we think there's a need for a physical location in the region, make it a hub of learning. We're willing to build the training center to do that. So other questions might be, well, why not use the technical school campus or their facilities, and why not? And there's a lot of reasons why that can be challenging. One of the reasons is because there's a certain amount of programming and credentialing that goes on at the tech schools that needs to be maintained. That's their business model. If you have an independent training center, what you can do is be more flexible in the kinds of training that you're offering. So instead of offering a 10-week technical school program, you might be able to offer a 1-week targeted training program that may end up in a certificate and a job at the end of the day. Great.
Thank you. Let's see. We have a comment from Shannon Dell. I feel like it is even as deep as talking to the parents. I feel I lived in an area that used to have family trade businesses everywhere. Now I see a trend that parents do not want to have this hard life, in quotes, for their kids. So they push them into other fields. So a wide approach is necessary. I don't know if you have any response to that.
I do. You're absolutely correct. I'm from Detroit. My family worked in the auto plants their entire life. They worked hard to help me go to college, not to have that life. And in their disappointment, one of the first jobs I had out of college was actually going back to an automotive plant to work, more on the engineering side than actually on the line. But no, that's exactly correct. And I think too, when we talk with manufacturers, we go across the region and across the country. Manufacturing today isn't what it used to be. It's cleaner. I mean, it's a lot different. It's not your grandparents or parents manufacturing. So getting the parents on board is critical. And that's some of the middle school programming that the Southern Carolina Alliance is looking at. And there's two benefits to that. One is you get the parents on board, get them open to it, they'll guide their children. But we're also finding is the parents are learning something too that they didn't know, and that there's an opportunity maybe to engage them more locally. So that is a dead on perfect yes.
Great, thanks. Well, okay. I think if we've had some interaction, and you probably can go on ahead, Ken. I don't see anything else in the chat right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit now about a kind of a different approach, a different partnership, and it's called the Florida-Georgia Workforce Alliance. So they're a group of economic development agencies and workforce development agencies. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the WIOA system and local workforce development boards. You've probably interfaced with your local workforce development boards. What was going on in Florida and Georgia is that there's a lot of folks that live in southern Georgia along the Florida border that travel across the border every day for jobs. So rural southern Georgia, they're going into Tallahassee, they're going into Jacksonville for jobs. And there's a lot of jobs in those regions. So what this region decided to do is they decided to get together to figure out how to better support those citizens in making those transitions. So how can we support citizens that are living in southern Georgia to get them the job skills and the training that they need in order to be able to get that great employment, get those great jobs in Florida. Now, the interesting thing about this alliance is that they're going through a rebranding process and they're expanding. They're actually moving towards Alabama as well. So they're really going to touch all of the border counties between Florida, Georgia, and Alabama to really focus in on the same mission of how do we prepare workers in the region for the jobs that are in the region. Now, they have a couple of big industries. fintech is one of their big industries out of Jacksonville. That's financial technology. And it involves some computer programming, and they're really good jobs, a lot of back office work. Healthcare is very prevalent across the region, as I'm sure it's in the regions that you're in. And there's a lot of need for healthcare professionals, especially nurses and home health aides across the region. Logistics and distribution is huge in the region. There's a lot of highways and distribution centers in the region. But there's also a lot of manufacturing in the region, especially as it's related to wood and wood products, because in Georgia, there are a lot of forests that they strategically utilize to make wood products. And there's a lot of mills. So there's a lot of different things going on that they needed to do. So really what their goal was, and again, it takes a lot of partners and a lot of work, and there's 12 different workforce regions, 8 different economic development regions, all coming together to coordinate this. So what their big need is to coordinate services to help job seekers and employers in these multiple states. So that's huge, because at this level, now you're getting to touching both federal policy and state policy. Why would the state government in Georgia want to use their workforce development dollars to train a Georgia citizen to go just find a job in Florida? So you have to have those conversations. It's actually a good thing, right? Because they're going to pay income tax, presumably in Georgia, and they're going to be gainfully employed, and they're going to bring that money back into Georgia, and they're going to buy products and services in Georgia. But it's hard to tell a local elected official that, hey, listen, training people in Georgia to get a job in Florida is really the right thing. So it's really takes some coordination and people talking. The strategy really was to bring these partners together from across these states, have conversations, have some strategic planning, and really identify some areas that they can work on together. They really started to focus in on industries. So the plan was to use industry sectors to drive their decision making. Healthcare, manufacturing, financial technology are the 3 biggest areas they decided to focus on. Those all have family sustaining jobs. It's not that they weren't going to look at some of the other industries, but they really needed to focus on industries that they could all agree on. The cool thing about this partnership, between the state and the local workforce and development economic agencies, is that they're also still doing their own thing. So there's local needs that the local regions are responding to, but on the big stuff that really affects this entire vast region, they are working together. The alliance is part of their deal. Their progression is they're working on becoming a 501c3 so they can go after grant funding themselves and to be able to support more of these innovative programs in the region. Again, it really took them about 2 years just to get people talking the same language, right? Bringing the partners together to agree and nod their heads to make this happen. So it's been really innovative. I was actually on a phone call just before this with this group. They're progressing pretty well. And one of their bigger areas to focus on is going to be healthcare in the future. And they're really going to focus on securing some grants to help them supplement their healthcare training, specifically their nursing training. And something you might be familiar with when it comes to nursing training is the clinical part of that. So you can send people to training to become a nurse or school to become a nurse, but they have to get attached to a hospital in order to do their clinical part. And that's been a challenge. So they're going to work on resolving those issues. So, the big challenge for this group has really been, it's a large geographic region. And really, they were trying to meet in person before the pandemic. The pandemic, as horrible as this has been, going virtual and meeting virtual has actually helped to coalesce this group. So they're really progressing. So it's really hard to meet in person, but those in-person meetings are really important too. So that's one of the big benefits that has come out of this. I'm going to kind of stop there and see, if there's any thoughts or responses.
Thanks, Ken. We do have a question in the chat to give folks a second if they do want to ask a direct question, speaking themselves. But John Niederman asks, are there any local community development programs like the Fahe members partnering with the Regional Development Alliance, or is it just educational and government organizations?
So that's a great question. My next example kind of jumps into that a little bit, but we are seeing a lot of that. What's really interesting is we see a lot of, especially economic development agencies, trying to work in the workforce development space. And really, quite honestly, every organization we talk with, it's all about jobs. The Department of Commerce, local departments of commerce, it's about jobs. They want members. We work with a lot of organizations like manufacturing associations at the state level. That they're looking at jobs. How do we help our members secure jobs and get into the workforce development space? We have worked with kind of maybe a little bit more similar. There's a group up in Massachusetts called the Functional Fabric Association of America. So they're kind of attached to MIT up in Massachusetts. They're a nonprofit, and their real focus has been on helping to support manufacturers in the fabric industry until recently, when they figured out, the industries that they're working with really are trying to address, they need to address workers. They don't have enough workers in those industries. The fabric industry is a little bit industry. We all wear clothes, right? Those clothes come from someplace. And for the most part, the mills that make the fabric, that make the clothes, haven't changed much in the past 50 years. But technology is now starting to change. So they're seeing a need to kind of catch up with that. So we're seeing a lot of non-traditional organizations that don't usually dabble in workforce really look for partners that they can get into workforce, and really try to figure that out, because it's really such a huge need. And there's just the kind of disparity between who's really, those jobs that people want to have, those jobs that they do have, poverty, family sustaining, creating programs that can be self-sustaining are really important to work on.
Thank you. We don't have any other questions in the chat, but I have another probably poorly articulated. Oh, here we go. Another art from the chat. Let me displace my poorly articulated question. I'll think about it more. We've got from Ken Stuber in Eastern Kentucky. Have you worked with the Micro Works Foundation any? That's works capitalized.
No, I have not. I would love to hear more about them though.
And I know you'll be sharing your contact info. Ken, I don't know if you want to add anything right here or come on the mic to talk about it, or feel free to follow up with Ken later if you'd like.
Yeah, definitely at the end, if Kenny would like to jump on, would love to hear about it. And we plan to have some time at the end of this for you all to ask questions, and really would like to hear more about what you're doing as well.
Maybe I should maybe I'll let you keep going then, so we'll have that time. Yeah. So my kind of third example is interesting. It's kind of an interesting group of folks to work with. So, the National Urban League and Unidos US are really two of the largest civil rights organizations in the country. National Urban League, their focus is on Black citizens, Black and Brown citizens, really to help them advance civil rights and education, and really help them grow and prosper. Unidos is a Latino-based organization, and kind of the same thing. They're focused on their populations, and really trying to work with them. And traditionally, these organizations they focus on civil rights issues, but what they found recently is that there's opportunities that to grow and to learn and to move people into jobs. So these two organizations got together, approached JP Morgan Chase about some grant funding, really to look at their underserved populations and prepare them for what they called these middle skill jobs. So the idea here is, what's a middle skill job? Well, a middle skill job is that job that you do require, a high school diploma and a little bit of training after high school, but not a college degree. So the idea is that how can Unidos and National Urban League work together
to kind of help build out a plan nationally to support serving their populations to transition into middle skill jobs. So they talked to JP Morgan Chase about some funding to help them, number one, identify what are those middle skill jobs. Where are they? What industries are they in? Where are the big pockets of the country that middle skill jobs are in? And then really start to look at what are those training opportunities nationally that can support those jobs. So it's interesting, looking at a national perspective is challenging. And then at the end of the day, this all gets back to local, right? So a little bit more about Unidos and National Urban League. They are a national organization, but they're organized into local chapters. And each of those local chapters really are independent. They operate independently, they do things independently. So the goal of this initiative that they have is really to say, okay, here's the data to support the middle skill jobs initiative nationally. And now let's look at the different regions and the different cities that these chapters are working in, and figure out how we can help our citizens really transition into those middle skill jobs. And what that meant for them, again, was coming back to partnerships, right? So in a lot of times when we talk with employers, they're like, well, where can we find new employees? And in this case, what these organizations did is that they looked to partner with the local workforce development agencies and the school systems to say, hey, listen, we've got our participants, we've got our citizens, our populations that want to learn, they want to transition into these positions. We know the positions, we want to target these employers to get into these middle skill jobs. We're missing this middle piece. How can we get the education out there to do that? So then working with the workforce development agencies and education agencies, they started to identify these training programs, and then created a pipeline. They created a pipeline from the populations that Unidos and National Urban League were working with into these training programs and then into these jobs. And a key part of this was really that final step, that placement piece. It's that relationship with those employers, which oftentimes we don't necessarily consider a partner, but really are. So working directly with those employers to develop that pipeline where people could complete training and just move right into a job. Oftentimes that training is completed with the employer. So people are getting those jobs and really starting to move that forward. What was kind of really great about this project is they're going for full steam. Then the pandemic hit, of course, and they hit a couple of bumpy, roadblocks. I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to build it up. But the key there is they got some seed money from JP Morgan Chase to really figure out how to do this, what that implementation looked like. And then, through having many, many conversations with federal, state, and local partners, they were able to kind of figure out what's the best role and responsibility for everybody to do. Stop there. See if there's any questions before I kind of move on.
Do you care if I ask a question out loud? I was
Feel
typing
free.
it in the chat,
Yeah.
but it takes forever. Okay. You have talked a lot about building relationships with workforce development boards and the education systems. And I think our network has done a really good job of creating those partnerships with workforce development boards in particular. And then when I say education system, I think we do a really good job with like higher ed. But you've also mentioned, starting younger in the middle school and stuff like that. And here, where I live in Madison County, right here in central Kentucky, and our teachers are overwhelmed and they're tied to a curriculum. And so I feel like there's just I don't know how we break into that kind of space. So do you have any advice for like building a partnership with like the K through 12 sector instead of just higher ed?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. They are tied to a curriculum. You're exactly right. And it comes down to, what those resources are. So what we've learned, and K through 12 is so important, right? Depending on the state you're in, working through your state level partnerships to get the right introductions to the right people. What we've learned is most successful is engaging those teachers in the development of career pathway programs. And what that means is, when we develop career pathway programs, we bring employers together, we bring educators together, we bring parents together, and really start to define what that pathway looks like. There's a lot of data that supports, hey, here's a healthcare pathway. Here's all the things that you can do in healthcare. And then by creating these programs and then literally giving them to the school systems. What we're doing in South Carolina is employers, companies that are looking for people, are offering to go into the school systems and talk about the career pathways that are available. And they're offering to do field trips and bring teachers and students into their facilities. And it was interesting because we talked with one employer in South Carolina initially, like, I don't want to bring any kids into my facility. There's no way, that's not going to work. And then he thought about it, and he called me back later and he goes, you know what, that's probably not a half bad idea, because there's those multiple touch points, right? You bring some kid into a really nice manufacturing facility that's got robots and is really cool, then they're going to start thinking about that. And then, another touch point a couple years later, they're going to hear about that again as a freshman in high school. And then there's going to be an internship opportunity that's available to them as a junior. Many of you maybe kind of went through that where, I know when I was in high school, there were all kinds of internship opportunities to go and work that were kind of developed. That's what we did. There was technical education. A lot of that's kind of been kind of taken apart over the years, but it's starting to come back. But to answer your question directly, Jesse, I think that the goal there is that talk with them, understand, like you just said, they're not going to change their curriculum. They're tied to that. There's state testing that's tied to that. But there are opportunities to supplement it and focus on career paths. And if you're asking them to be a part of that solution and offering the resources of other people to come in and share that knowledge, my sense is, and we've always had success with this, the teachers are going to jump at that. Principals, plan a career day with principals. They'd love to be able to do that. And always invite the parents, right? Because I think most of the time people are surprised. The parents, sometimes they're more interested in the jobs than their kids are, because they're looking at it going, here's something pretty cool here that I didn't know about. When we were talking to, somebody that just got hired at a factory up in Massachusetts with the fabric industry, he was like, part of one of our focus groups. And he was like, you know what? I drove by this facility every day for 10 years and never knew what it was. If I would have known 10 years ago what this place done, I would have walked in here before to get a job, but there's that awareness piece that has to happen too. But I think definitely engaging the school system, being creative, offering solutions, being supportive is the way to go. Sorry, I can be long-winded sometimes.
Well, no, we really appreciate it. I don't have any additional questions in the chat, except for some more appreciation on the detail here. So if you wanted to continue, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, just to kind of, wrap up, I'm glad, Jesse, you talked about that you do have relationship with, workforce development. I think that's great. I think as your organization, bringing additional resources to that relationship and additional partners too. There are a lot of other partners that are out there. Definitely engaging with employer associations is a great way to bring other partners to the table. They often have resources. Employers don't necessarily know how to engage with organizations like yours or workforce development or education. Clearly defining what those needs are from their perspective. I know, we talked earlier, part of our mission is to understand through other people's eyes, and figure out what they expect. So defining that need from an employer's perspective or another partner is good. Healthcare is a huge industry that needs lots of people. We know that. So figuring out how to engage with healthcare and hospitals and what the steps are, to help them are good. Healthcare is doing a really good job of trying to do it on their own, but they also need partners. I can't stress enough, the need to have kind of a strategy and a plan in place as well. And that strategy is really a group strategy. So when you have your partners in place, it's really figuring out, okay, how are we going to do this? And again, don't be afraid to try. And the goal is at the end of the day, and I know we've spent a lot of time talking about workforce development and people, but at the end of the day, the goal, we can't lose sight of the goal. It's really to help people find jobs so they can be sustaining, so they can sustain their families. What you all do is incredibly important in that piece, because, the housing piece is huge. I can't, in a lot of the regions we work, there just isn't great housing, so the stuff that you're doing in relation to that is really, really critically important. So I really would like to open it up, for some questions. If you have any general questions, I've got 1,000 stories, as Alex knows, that I like to talk about. But then also offer out to you too, as how can I help? I offered Alex before is, I would really like to hear from more of you and just really offer that advice. As a company, this is what we do. And if you've got an idea that you've been thinking about in your mind that you're like, I just don't know how to kick this off or go to the next step with it. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you, hear about that idea, and maybe offer you some suggestions as to how you can get it to the next step. So I'll stop there and feel free to take yourself off mute if you got a question or throw it in the chat.
Thank you very much, Ken, again, for your comments and for your making yourself available for further conversation now and in the future. Looks like we have a question in the chat while folks may be preparing to unmute. Rebecca Dillo asks, were there partners that focus on helping the clients with financial coaching and credit cleanup, budgeting, etc.? If so, how did that partnership look?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So a lot of times, a lot of the partners we bring in to help us do provide, that financial assistance. They do provide some training, financial literacy training. There's an organization we work with. It's a national organization. It's called CALE, the Center for Adult and Experiential Learning, which helps take people that have had a work history and transition that into college credit and certificate credit. A couple of the other partners we work with, I think, are worth mentioning. We do work a bit with the court systems. So helping people that are, formerly incarcerated, friend of the court, folks that, maybe owe some back child support, really helping work with the court system to get people back on their feet, as well. I think what we find too is housing and urban development is another one of the partners we work with. They also have some workforce development programs that they're running. There's a lot around financial literacy. There's an organization in Detroit that we work with. The name is escaping me right now. And I'm pretty sure they're part of a national group, but they help, low-income citizens with their tax returns. So they're a place where people can go to help with some of that financial literacy and help, complete tax returns. We work with partners that sometimes help people that do have criminal records, work on how to expunge, stuff that can be expunged from their criminal records, things like that. We work a lot with adult education as well. Great questions.
I don't have any more in the chat. Just going to give a second if somebody was wanting to unmute but not interrupt you. And I have another question I can ask too.
Alex, I have a question. We are, hi Ken, this has been really, really helpful. So we're trying to develop career pathways for our allied health training. We work really closely with our employers, and we basically set up a little mini technical center that we bring our community college to. As we're trying to recruit and communicate about why you might be interested in taking these courses, I keep thinking like providing them with a picture of, you might start here, but there's all the places you can go. And it's turned out to be harder than I thought to make this career path. So I'm just curious if any of the people you work with have engaged in trying to create career pathway pictures as part of explaining the importance of their programs. Yes,
I will try and point you in the right direction too. There is an organization out of Colorado that when you talk about picture, they actually created an interactive website. That I think it's exactly what you're talking about. I'm going to try and find it, and I'll forward it to Alex, and he can make sure you get it. And share it with the whole group. But it's stuff like that. You're exactly right, that picture. I know the workforce regions around Chicago Economic Development, they created a series of videos for a bunch of career pathways, which have been really effective for them. And the challenging part about career pathways is that you do kind of have to sometimes make them exciting. So that picture, and then the pathway itself is, but the other challenge with pathways, what we find is the steps, right? Far too often people are like, I want to be done with it. I want to be a nurse, but there's a lot of steps to go to become that nurse. And, by the time somebody might get around to making that decision that they want that to be a nurse, that now they've got a few years of school in front of them. And they may have a family already that they need to support. Not that we want to discourage them. We need to remove those barriers. But yeah, I'll connect you with some folks that do some really great career pathway stuff for sure.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Karen, again. Ken, we have a question in the chat from John Niederman. And this was kind of getting to what I was going to ask as well. So John asks, are there key foundations that you've worked with that could be important for Fahe and its members to access? And I'll sort of, just add a little color there that when we've looked into workforce development, like at the staff level, Jessie and her team who asked a question earlier, running some good programs, those are backed by like flexible Appalachian Regional Commission money, to get started. But once you start to sort of think broader and more at scale and repeatable, some of the funding is pretty limited. I think that's why John is asking of that question, to sort of get that startup to have that coordination. I wonder if you could add some thoughts on that.
Yeah, there are some foundations that we've worked with in the past. The Eli Lilly Foundation, we work with. I think they're more focused in the Midwest. They've come around a bit with what we would call unencumbered funds, right? So it's like, what do you need to do in order to, what kind of funding would help you just kind of move things along, and what we're finding is that some of the foundations, they're really trying to say, okay, listen, we usually have measurables, we usually have metrics. We know you need some money to grease the skids, so this is what we're going to do. The Ford Foundation is another one that has seemed to be doing that a little bit. The Kresge Foundation is another one that seems to be doing that. Ford is more of a national foundation. We've worked a little bit with the Clinton Global Initiative in the past. So more on an advisory role and kind of helping them figure out, how they can fund some things. I'll think of some others. There's another one, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I think foundations are great to work with on stuff. There's also, I don't know if you're familiar with it, the EDA, the U.S. Economic Development Authority, just recently put out a grant opportunity that you guys might be interested in. I'll shoot you the information over, Alex, but it really is, it's an opportunity to maybe work together as a big region to help create some of this infrastructure. And I don't want to say infrastructure around education or workforce development. It's really around the infrastructure to support education and workforce development. So it's an interesting opportunity. We're going to throw $100 million into it. I think it might be something you might want to look at.
Yes, we have our eye on it and are in the sort of research project. But if you have information that you've seen, definitely would appreciate you sending that over. Thank you, and thanks for the response there. I think we're at the time where I need to transition it back to our MCs, Vonda leading up the conference here. So I just want to say one more time from all of or it's Dwayne. Okay, it's Dwayne. Sorry, Dwayne. Ken, thank you so much for your time. I know folks are gotten a lot of great questions and comments here, and I think hopefully more in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all. It was great to meet you. And please feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that I can do for any of you. Again, and thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Some great information. It's funny you started talking about the workforce development and the training, and Rebecca's asked a couple times today about financial literacy and so forth. back in the day when I was in school, I remember we had a humanities teacher, and that was part of his curriculum that he brought to. It was just his. It was once a month he would bring someone from a manufacturing company or a workforce trainer in, or someone that owned a company into the class just to talk about what they did, and to teach kids and show kids what's out there. Same thing with the financial training. He taught financial literacy, how to balance a checkbook, how to things that they don't teach. And if you think back to the earlier session today with Ms. Manchin and then what Ken's talked about and the session with workforce training that we had this morning with the recovery, all this comes together. It's all needed to move forward. And so as we move into the next sessions and we start thinking about the rest of the day, I think that would be the challenge to everyone is how do we bring all this together and wrap it into one thing and start bringing it into the communities? How can we all bring it together as a group and have a bigger impact in our community?